Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 165 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. We're going to have a fun episode today talking about just, updates and general stuff about U.S. immigration with Carl Shusterman, one of the OGs of the immigration field, talking about his thoughts of what's going on as the year is ending 2020. What a wild year it was. Starting 2021. Before getting into that, just some housekeeping stuff. The Champions for Freedom Marriage Green Card course, teaching how to do marriage adjustment, consular processing, the basics of inadmissibility, affidavit support, all that kind of stuff, is out. If you're interested in that, just send me an email at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. That's info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. 12 hours of video with handouts and all this kind of stuff that'll get you started in that process, know what to do. Secondly, our gracious and great sponsor, DocuWise, the immigration form software company that provides, immigration forms and much more all-in-one packages and everything for people who are doing immigration cases and want to streamline the process. It's a software that I use for my firm. You get a discount with them. So if you're going to get an annual plan, you get 10% off the already discounted price. So just go to www.docwise.com/immigration-lawyers-podcast and insert the code Immigration Lawyers Podcast in there to get that. I strongly recommend using that software, at the very least, giving it a try. Do a trial run to see how great it is and how many features it has. And every day we get an email with new stuff that they're adding there. Another thing that's kind of cool, I was going to hold that as a surprise, but I'll say it anyways. I'm launching the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine. Goal is to have it out in a month or two. We're getting all the articles and submissions together, and hopefully it's going to be something that's going to continue on a regular basis. If you had any ideas and article submissions you want to do, just email me, and we have a panel board kind of thing. We'll take a look and we'll let you know if we could do it and whether to write it, all that kind of stuff. But just email info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com and you can do that. And if you want to sponsor like a branding opportunity there, email as well. We'll take a look at it and see how that would work. One note of thank you I want to give to a website, it's a top 55 U.S. immigration podcast. I was listed as number one on there. If you just type in, let me go to the guy's website to see what it is. The blog.feedspot.com/US_immigration_podcasts. And you could catch it there. Top 60 immigration podcasts you must follow. We're on that list along with a lot of great colleagues and some not so great colleagues. By that I mean, I think FAIR is there, a lot of the anti-immigration groups and stuff. So, but hey, everyone's going to have a different idea of what goes on in the immigration field. So that's that. And before starting, I just want to say, if you're watching this or listening to this anywhere you're doing that at, please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review so that people know what we have to offer here. We have a lot of regular listeners that email me, so I know you're there. Just leave it so it can help get more attention to the podcast and more people get involved, and we can share all this information and guidance as far and wide as possible. And with that, let's get it started.
Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast, a part of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, an education and marketing publication for the immigration law community that includes legal updates, interviews, discussions, education and CLE material, and more. Note that the information here is for general education only and not intended as individual legal advice. The laws change frequently, so you should consult with an attorney about your specific case. For more information, please visit immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a great guest, a guest we've had before, Carl Shusterman, one of the well-known immigration attorneys in our community and in just the world when it comes to immigration lawyers and lawyers, one of the top lawyers too, here to just talk about how 2020 was and recent events, just really open kind of forum. So, Carl, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Thank you, John. My pleasure.
Awesome. So what's on your mind?
Well, it's funny that we're having this today. I mean, it was sort of unplanned what happened earlier today. But, normally I do consultations with people, and then I have lawyers who I've worked with for years. And depending on whether it's employment-based or whether it's family-based or deportation, I give it to the lawyer who specializes in that particular area. But and I don't usually go to like adjustment of status interviews, things like that.
Yeah.
But today I did. My first time to do it, a virtual interview.
Oh, really?
And I did it this morning, and just all things just popped up in my mind that I probably should have thought about, when the pandemic started. But looking on the brighter side of this horrible pandemic that we're in. So I had a case, and these people had adjustment of status in downtown Los Angeles. I'm actually in Orange County now. We have a home in Orange County, but when we're finished with this Zoom meeting, we're going to be coming back to West Los Angeles again. But I didn't have to drive downtown, to attend the adjustment of status, and that was such a relief. I mean, just imagine driving from Orange County to downtown Los Angeles, standing in line, going through the metal detectors, then sitting in room 824 for the interview there, and going through all the rest of it. But instead, I just sat here on the phone. The examiner called me up, sat there on the phone, just interjected a couple of things. And the whole interview didn't take as long as a one-way drive from Orange County to downtown LA. So I thought, this is a great time savings, but I tend to talk to people all over the country and all over the world every day. And, I can see, if I was a potential client, I was in Atlanta or New York, even though my friends said, oh, go to Carl Shusterman or something like that, I would think, oh my God, to fly him out for my interview in Atlanta and all of this, it's going to be so expensive. And for me, it's going to be so time consuming. And now they let you do interviews remotely and represent your clients remotely. So it actually makes it a lot easier for us to represent clients all over the country than ever before.
I'm glad you let me know, because I didn't realize LA or our district had started yet, because I know some random parts of the country had, but it's good to know that they're doing it here. Were you already the attorney of record? Did you have a G28, or did they add you at the interview?
So sort of yes and no. When we took over this case about a year ago, I had my own law firm. We since merged into a bigger law firm, and then three of our attorneys, my two attorneys who used to be my employees, I'm not exactly their employees, but I'm of counsel to them. They've started their own law firm, and I do consultations. And like I said, depending on what kind of case is, I give it to the attorney and their level of expertise. This particular case, though, was actually supposed to stay with that larger law firm that we had joined. But I won't get into the details, but it came back to me. And I basically did it for free, because I didn't want these people to be stranded and not have any lawyer go to their appointment. So I prepped them for the appointment, told them what questions were going to be asked, what type of paperwork to bring with them, how to dress, what time to get there, all of that type of stuff. And it was in room 8024 in downtown LA, in the 300 Los Angeles Street. It was so funny because, when I worked for immigration in the 70s, I worked in 8010. That's where citizenship was, right next door to 8024. So, when I was describing it to these fellows, I could like visualize exactly where, you get off the elevator, you turn left, that kind of stuff. Then we had a examiner, and I told him, I said, he was saying, about how how the process works now because of the pandemic. And I said, no apologies needed. I said, for years, I had to drive from West LA to go to downtown, park my car, do all of that every day. And now you're calling me, and I'm, I didn't tell him because it was on the phone, but I'm sitting here in my t-shirt and chair and having something to drink. And not only, did I not have to get in my car and dress up and go downtown, but on my computer, since it wasn't a Zoom call like we're having now.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my client's file there, which was several hundred pages. Mm-hmm. And I had it all mapped out on a piece of paper. So if he asked about this issue or that issue, I'd know how to scroll and get it real fast.
Yeah.
And then in the other part of this room, I won't turn the computer around, but I have a big laptop there. And I had another part of this case on that. So yeah. I could use one computer for like researching different parts of the law in case, because, the examiners are not lawyers, so they don't always know, well, why, how does he qualify for this or that, So I had one thing about that. And then I had the other thing, which was all the forms and materials that we submitted for the interview. And I thought, if I were there in person, he wouldn't let me sit there with a computer on my lap and go through all of that.
Yeah.
So it's actually better representation for the client to be remote than it is to be sitting in the person's office. And it went very well today.
Good news. I sporadically hear on the listservs that some officers in various field offices won't call the attorney, or they'll say you have an option of having a translator or attorney. It seems like they're one-off kind of situations, and you should complain to the manager or something like that pops up. But overall, but like you said, having access to all that information at one time is really helpful, because you can't do that in an interview. It's like you have 10 things on your lap and things are falling over. It's like you just have to
exactly.
memorize what's going on in the case.
Yeah. So it was very personal. Even though I'm not seeing the guy's face and stuff, he had to go out to ask his boss something, and he tells my clients like, "Oh, you can converse," And I just made some joke. I said, as soon as you get out of the office, we'll be talking, and he started laughing, and, the case got approved. And I thought, oh, I really like this, maybe we can go to, I want to get my vaccine and get this thing over with.
Yeah.
But it would be so much more efficient for the Immigration Service to just run their interviews like that, instead of making everybody sit out there in the waiting room and so on. Because, the attorneys have to charge more too, because it takes a lot of time.
It's going to open up representation to a lot of people that should have lawyers at the interview. In some stuff, maybe having a lawyer there is good to kind of calm the client down, or to like keep the officer at bay if the officer is going to be really aggressive. But for most cases, it works just fine. A vast majority. Hopefully, I'll bring down the prices so that people can use lawyers more from all across the country, because it doesn't really matter the location of the lawyer at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, I have some article I once wrote online. I think it's about asylum, but it was like 4 tips to win your case, and one of the tips says location, location, location. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, in that case, it was about some parts of the country, the judges have a much higher grant percentage. Okay. But it also works as far as choosing a lawyer. If you live in a particular city where maybe there's just not a whole lot of really great lawyers, and then your friend or your company tells you, oh, we use this guy, and it's like, yeah, but he's 2,000 miles away, and location becomes a big issue. But it looks to me in the pandemic that it's become less of an issue.
Yeah. I had a consultation with a person that went to their green card interview. It was Iranian, and they didn't bring certain documents the Iranians have, and they got an RFE on it. And they live in a rural area, so the lawyer wasn't aware of it. So if they had an attorney that deals with this kind of stuff more often, I could have and they're comfortable just contact anyone from anywhere, knowing that, I could participate in the interview, we could have set them up to avoid this RFP by submitting documents with the initial application. But you mentioned asylum, and I was talking to a colleague this morning. The asylum office made it a rule where, for now, you can't bring your own translator. You have to use their translators in their system. And I was talking to a colleague this morning who is an Arabic speaker. He's from an Arabic country, and he's going to be on the show next week actually to talk about it. And what happened is a lot of people now who are Arabic speakers who have asylum cases are calling him because he flies out to anywhere that they ask to be the place or to watch out over the translators. And he's gone through so many. What he saw is some offices, he said in California, they've been good, but in some other states, the translators are incorrectly translating to a point where it really is affecting the case. And he's there to catch it because he speaks that language, especially Arabic, because they have so many different dialects depending on the country. And in one case, the applicant kept saying, "You're translating wrong. You're translating wrong." And the translator was not translating to the officer that the applicant was saying the translator is translating wrong. But he was there and says, "Listen, I'm an Arabic speaker. This person's wrong." They changed three translators within that interview until they got that worked. And it was one company that's provided these translators. And so on a case like asylum, the effects of this no translator rule is so drastic. That's why I told him, let's come on next week after the holidays when he come to talk about this, because practitioners need to know about this, and people got to know, for asylum, maybe if your English isn't good and you need a translator, bring a lawyer to the interview with you that could, watch out for the translator, watch over the watcher if you want, because you don't know what they're going to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a number of those cases over the years where, where we brought people that are native-born people from a particular country, and then the government puts a translator on the phone, and sometimes those translators make mistakes that could alter whether you're going to get asylum or not get asylum. It's really a due process issue in my estimation.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a chance there's gonna be some lawsuits about this for the people that didn't get approved. With all these class actions that are happening right now, this is ripe. If they're consistently finding like certain states are using companies that have bad translators, that's something that could reopen a bunch of cases too. So immigration is just nonstop, good stuff, bad stuff, but just wild. It's the wild west law. It seems like it's like cowboys here.
But did you see there was, I didn't get to read the whole thing yet, but there was an important Ninth Circuit decision today on the H-1Bs?
There's so many of these Ninth Circuit H-1Bs. I'm not sure it's the same case or different case. I haven't read them, no, but.
Oh, okay. Well, I just sort of was reading the summary before we got on, but immigration was coming out with these wild theories about, computer programmers or systems analysts, they don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree to do the job, so they shouldn't be H-1Bs. And it's like, oh my God, like that's probably the biggest occupation in the whole H-1B area, right? And the district court ruled against that policy. But earlier today, the Ninth Circuit upheld the district court decision.
Ooh.
So,
oh wow!
I think that I know we still have 20-something days in this administration, but I don't know. I don't know that that's going to be enough time for the Supreme Court to overrule the Ninth Circuit on this.
But yeah, I mean, we'll see how to undo a lot of this. The last 4 years, I mean, you've been practicing for decades. I mean, you think you've seen it all, and then this happens the last 4 years. It's like, wow, I didn't think it gets this bad.
Yeah, I mean, these 4 years were so different than the 30-something years I practiced before this. Mm-hmm. And really, I don't mean to be overtly political about it. It's not Democrats versus Republicans. I remember in 1986 when Ronald Reagan signed a bill giving millions of people amnesty in the United States, and the Republicans were really on board with that. Even if you want to go back further to the, I'll tell you something funny. I was once reading this book. We were in Costco, and I pulled this book off the shelf by Ann Coulter, called Idios America. And it was all about how immigrants are ruining this country, blah, 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 blah. And she kept coming back to the 65 law, which opened up immigration to people in all countries in the world, right? Depending on their qualifications and things. And she just kept repeating this thing that it was Teddy Kennedy's ultra-liberal plot to put the Democrats in power forever, right? And I thought, it's interesting that she frames it that way. But I had my computer and I looked up the actual vote on the 65 bill. Democrats in the Senate, for instance, voted for it 2-1. Republicans voted for it 4-1. So if this was really a Kennedy's ultra liberal plot, why, I don't think those Republican senators are stupid people, and they're basically, immigration for most of my career has been fairly bipartisan. And in some cases, the interest of immigrants and immigration attorneys align with Democrats, and sometimes they've aligned with Republicans. Back in 2001, I testified in front of the Senate Immigration Subcommittee, and the Senate had just flipped, and Senator Brownback, a very conservative Republican from Kansas, was head of the committee. And anybody interested in it, I have like a little 2-minute blurb of that on my webpage, but he was very, very pro-immigrant, and he especially wanted more doctors and nurses in rural places like most of Kansas. After I testified, he asked me to help his staff write a bill to make it easier to get doctors and nurses to immigrate to the US. And we did that. And then the Senate flipped again. I think it was Jeffries or something, left the Republican Party, and they didn't have a majority anymore. So Kennedy then, this ultra liberal, took over the immigration subcommittee, and the bill that I had helped the Brownback people write, that just died. Wow. Because, what you have to understand, and I'm pro-union and all of this stuff, but there's always been a clash between the labor unions and immigration, because they see foreign workers coming in and undercutting the wages of union members. So the person I was sitting next to at that hearing was from the SEIU, who represented tons of nurses. And no matter, I tried to convince her to be more pro-immigration. I said, you say there's not enough nurses and things. And I'm all for more nursing schools in the United States to turn out more American nurses, but it's going to take a while to happen. So let's just make it a little easier for foreign-born nurses to immigrate to the US. And she would just, every time I'd say that, she'd shake her head and stuff. And that, that's a reason that some liberal Democrats are not always in favor of increased immigration, or the H-1B cap, which I think is ridiculous to have a cap on this, but it was mostly something to appease the Democrats and the labor union. So sometimes the Republicans are friends, sometimes the Democrats are friends when it comes to more immigration. But now the current president, or he'll be the current president for another 30 days, he's just made that such a campaign issue that nothing can get passed. And I'm hoping that when a new president takes over, that the two parties can come together like they used to and pass immigration legislation.
I mean, you hit it on the head. I think when it comes to, the statute you provided about the Senate with regards to Democrats, Republicans passing the original 65 bill, I think especially with the power the union had during that era, The primary group that blocks a lot of the immigration laws is from the unions. And so Democrats, being historically representative of unions, Republicans not, they were pro, labor coming in, even if in their eyes it decreases costs. What we've seen it with Trump is he switched a lot of the blue collar workers to his side by attacking immigration. And part of that does overlap with the union. So union base does go to him. But I'm not sure if they're going to stay with him or not. The unions in general have decreased dramatically. So their power has substantially gone down, except President Biden is a union kind of guy. And so I'm skeptical to a decent amount whether he's going to be that lenient on a lot of these immigration categories. Just like Obama talked about immigration happening, but not using his political capital towards that, focusing on healthcare and other kind of stuff. I'm still hesitant to think, other than maybe taking away some of the draconian, really nasty kind of trial bans Trump had, of whether he's going to use his political capital to do any widespread stuff on immigration. I mean, this morning, Susan Rice, one of his agents, reps, said that we're not going to really open the border, like take MMP, the border stuff, asylum rules out of the way that quickly. And I understand that, but I don't know if he's going to go that wide scale on changing stuff necessarily. Maybe stuff on the periphery, but we'll see. We'll see. It's still unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ironic thing is that President Trump, who is so critical of Obama for he said, I'm sympathetic to the kids on DACA, but hey, we have a system of government that has to pass the Congress and all of that. And I mean, I think it was a realistic argument, but then he came in and almost everything he did in immigration was by executive action. So he was doing the same thing he was criticizing Obama for.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a little more optimistic. I think that at least it would be a lot easier for Biden to repeal a lot of the Trump immigration policies because they're not bills that went through Congress. So he has the opportunity to do that. But I mean, we'll see exactly how much I wrote a couple articles that I put on my website about the ones I thought would go through easily, and then the ones that would be more difficult. But it's the travel bans have cut immigration, for green cards about in half in the last 4 years. So, but the funny thing is, and I don't like Trump, so I hate to say I agree with him on one of the main points of immigration, but I actually do. He would talk about we should make the immigration system more merit-based. And I really think that rather than have people apply for their brothers and sisters or go through a visa lottery, that the immigration should be in the interest of the country that's accepting the immigrants. So, why not bring in more college-educated people? Why not bring in more entrepreneurs and things like that, rather than, and my wife's an immigrant, and I said, some of your brothers and sisters are wonderful people and some are not very good at all. They shouldn't be able to immigrate just because they're your brothers and sisters. They should have to prove their worth. And, earlier this week when the vaccine started rolling out, I looked at the Pfizer, I know what it was, 60 Minutes had a segment about the Pfizer vaccine. So I wrote down the names. They have a German company called BioNTech that they partnered with that really did a lot of the work in getting this vaccine out. The two people who own the company who talked on the show, I looked them up after the show. I don't know if you remember, but Germany in the past has had a lot of native resentment against Turks immigrating there. Yeah. Well, the two people that own the BioNTech, the first guy, it's a husband and wife. He's a Turkish immigrant to PhD, all this stuff. And the wife's born in Germany, but she's the daughter of Turkish immigrants. And then when it went over to Pfizer, the CEO of Pfizer was a Jewish Greek immigrant, you know, and the lady that took the leading role in supervising 600 of their scientists in developing and testing the vaccine was a German-born scientist. So like all four of these people that 60 Minutes selected as people who got this vaccine out in an incredible time, they were all immigrants, you know, either to Germany or the United States. And I thought, where would we be right now without people like this?
Exactly. That's the mindset I don't understand when it comes to the whole situation. When we know it's like factual that a big part of, you know, the adventurousness of a country and development comes from the immigrant community. It's a bizarre mindset to be so against it. At least some compromise should be possible. We'll see. I mean, last couple of years, things have been really, you know, torn apart where everyone's on this side or that side. Hopefully, you know, Biden comes in and you know, kind of calms stuff down, because we can't really continue having this kind of like a nation divided like this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I grew up in California, it was a very solid Republican state. Yeah. And I didn't even know at the time, but I'm reading a book right now about the Japanese American internment, and the resentment against the Japanese was so bitter. You know, they put over 100,000 people in camps because they were so suspicious that they were aiding the Japanese war effort. But in reality, there was never a single Japanese American person who was ever convicted of aiding the Japanese. And they didn't put the Germans and the Italians in camps. I want to posit that they didn't, because they were white and the Japanese just looked different. Yeah. And I think I totally understand that if you don't have experience working with people that maybe don't look like you, or English is they're not their first language, or they're not Christian or whatever. Yeah. At first, you know, you're a little like, it's just a little strange for you. But I spent a lot of my career going to rural areas like in the South and so on, where they've had doctors from Philippines and China and so on. And they were so suspicious of them in the beginning. And then after a while, it's like, you know, they're just people and they care about us and they're good doctors, and it all changes. And I think that's part of, you know, Benjamin Franklin thought Germans would never be loyal, that they'd never learn English. And Germans have been the people who integrated much faster than the Irish or Italians and all of that type of stuff. The Irish were kept out of the U.S. and they were scorned and everything. Yeah. But in 1924, when they put the first quotas, I mean, they gave the quotas to England, to Germany, and to Ireland. It's like all of a sudden these people were accepted, you know. And I just look at the way California is right now, and I see that happening in various parts of the U.S. And I don't think people are going to, you know, like, oh, he's from China, or he's from Iran, or from India, or it's just not going to matter any more than people's hair color after 10 or 20 years. And I think it's starting to happen in a lot of states. But, you know, I'm optimistic about it. I think, you know, we can all live together very well. When I grew up, like racial intermarriage was not allowed. Just against the law. And now it's just so common that, you know, it's so much accepted by the society. Gay marriage certainly wasn't accepted until just a few years ago. And the case that I had today, that I went to immigration, was a gay marriage case, and I was listening very closely to the questions, and it was obvious that the immigration officer, he didn't have any animus or anything, or any increased suspicion because the two parties were gay. So I think people can adapt.
Yeah, I was at this. I went to this Christmas drive-through with my kids where they had. We sit in the car, we drive through, had a bunch of Christmas stuff around it, and at the end they had a black Santa Claus and a white Mrs. Claus together and saying bye to everybody. Like, you wouldn't have saw that really until the last couple of years, or last a decade. But things are becoming more commonplace on this kind of stuff. Mentioning Germany, my aunt lives in Germany, and my cousins they immigrated there as asylees back after the revolution and went to Germany. I had an uncle went to France. And one thing is, when you talk about people living together and you discuss how Germans felt about Turks, for example, my family's from Iran. When I go in to visit them, you could clearly see that even a generation afterwards of a family coming there, they still look at the foreign person differently because the populations there are more homogeneous. Like, you're French, you're German or something like that. But America's core is so assimilating and more accepting in a country. We really are an example to the world how it could be. And you look at China, where it's like, you're from the Han, you're Han Chinese, or you're outsider kind of stuff. And that's why right now, when we see a lot of people, talking bad about America and our country, about how we're like, so much hate in our country, which there is. Obviously, there's racism and stuff like that. Being a person that's an immigration attorney, dealt with racism, family from abroad, it really is only America, maybe somewhat Canada, but really America, where you can just come in and within a couple of years be American and just you act like an American, and you see yourself as American, and other people will respect that as well. You're not an outsider necessarily, unless you see yourself as an outsider. In Europe, I still see other people looking at you as the other, the natives. But America is so wonderful. It's such a beautiful thing we have here, where you could adjust, and it's within our culture.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And one of the guys in the book that I'm reading, who's, this is in the 1930s, Japanese in Oregon, and he's just taking a lot of heat from his classmates because he looks different, right? And they're saying, well, we're Americans, you're Japanese. But, just because somebody's Caucasian, the first people to settle America were not Caucasian, and they came usually from various European countries. So he just writes this poem, and he says, oh, well, you're American. You say, oh, well, I have blue eyes. And I look at your eyes and I said, oh, well, you have Swedish eyes. And then you say, I'm American. I have red hair. And I say, well, you're Irish. And it's on one hand, it sounds totally ridiculous. But on the other hand, it shows that the America that the Irish were here, and the Italians were here, and the Jews were here, and all that, and they used to have gangs and fight each other, and now they can live next to each other in the suburbs, and nobody even thinks about those kind of things. I'm optimistic that that will happen to various nationalities around the world. Here in Orange County, where I am, I'm actually one of the few white guys walking down the street. So yesterday, and then maybe I'll let you decide when to close, but yesterday there was this conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter, and we walked out to try to see it. We couldn't really visualize it very well, what was going on. And we walked to our next door neighbor. He's from India. He always has a big American flag there. I mean, and he and his kids were up there with binoculars and telescopes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we were just having a hard time seeing it because we didn't have a binocular or telescope. And so he just sent a picture while we were standing there to my wife's phone, and we saw that, and I'm just hoping that, I mean, his kids are smart, they're really sweet, they're really nice, and I'm hoping that as we go forward as a country, that it will be the same thing that the Irish went through it, the Swedish went through it, the Italians went through it, and now the Indians and the Chinese and the Iranians are going through it. But eventually, people will just look at each other and say, "Well, he's just a human, Oh, his eyes look different, or that's about as important as your hair color or your eye color. It's not a big deal."
One thing I think that helps America in that is the market system that we have, where it's about what service could anyone provide, and people look at you as a service provider. And if you bring good quality work and service, then that's all that matters. It's the content of your character and your work ethic and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to simply just some basic thing that you have no control over. And that's, again, like we have a history of racism and slavery in this country, but relative to other countries still, I see speaking of India, look at right now what the leadership in India is doing against big parts of the population. There's full on racism kind of stuff going on there. In China, in the East, in the West, they're doing that to the Uyghurs, and in Russia, they have their own thing all over the place. So I still give credit, as an immigration and a foreign background person, that like we're really onto something here. We shouldn't lose touch of just because of some things that do happen with law enforcement leaderships here. But I like your optimistic note. I didn't want to kill the optimism by putting too much of my own pessimism. My worry is if like some war does happen with Iran or with China, all of a sudden this the tribalism comes out, and it's so easy to identify people from if they're not white, and so it comes out because a lot of these Japanese and the internment camps, they took away their property, their money, they took everything they had. And these were people that were third generation Japanese. Like they had no idea anything about Japan. Their grandpa came here, and it was so bad. But, they were really afraid. Pearl Harbor attack was really bad. The Japanese during World War II were really ruthless kind of warriors, the way they were handling stuff. They really were pacified and like a different culture nowadays. But it was a scary time. And so, I could see like if we go to war with China, for example, I'm not sure how that would work out because everyone would that'd be the worst war in the world. But people could easily turn around, and poor Koreans and Japanese and Filipinos would get caught up in that too. Like I swear, like after 9/11 happened, so many Indians who were Sikh, which were, Sikhs generally are not cool with Muslims and not, but they were getting attacked. And like, I swear I'm not a Muslim. We're not even good with Muslims many times, but people can't tell a difference. And so that kind of stuff. So hopefully peace prevails and we just do business and try to, prevent that kind of escalation that can get out of hand.
Yeah. I don't want to be overly optimistic. I know there's a lot of ethnic tension, and the last 4 years have really increased that. But long term, I know we're on a slightly upward trajectory. There's no way to argue with that, because if you look 50 years ago, how, as you said, 50 or 100 years ago, you see the bent of history is towards exactly where you're going through. But in between, there's ups and downs. But I think all the downs just will cause us to always think again, like, why do we have this down? Did that make sense when we look back at it? Just like Japanese internment, which was, never considered illegal. It's still on the books that you're allowed to intern people in that kind of fashion in a time of war. They apologized for it, but they never went around and said the Supreme Court erred in, was it Fukamatsu or something like that, whatever that court. Korematsu, yeah. And so that is like an annoying thing. There's a lot of Supreme Court decisions that we think are bad, but they're still on the books. Like you could what's called stop people from getting pregnant. I forgot the terminology of that is, if they're if they're considered feeble-minded or something like that from the 20s. Oh yeah, Buck versus Bell. Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are still in the book. It's a law, but because we don't deal with it anymore, we think it's changed. But it's like, no, it's still law. You can still do that kind of stuff as it is. But overall, yeah, if things are, just the fact that I'm here and you're married to a foreign person, living happily, and Well, we're in Southern California, which is really open environment. But for the most part, when I travel around, I never, I've dealt racism constantly in my life, but I view it as the same as just like competition, it's almost, or people like, when you get cut off when you're driving, sometimes when people are really frustrated, they'll look at the person, and if it's a woman, they'll say, "Oh, woman driver." If it's Asian, so Asian driver. If it's a guy with a mustache, you say it's a mustache driver. It's kind of just doing it for a reason, because the innate frustration exists, and now the racism is just a secondary thing. It's really just a frustration with somebody or something, and so that's the core of it. It's not as much animosity that's that bad. So I think it'll dissipate in a big way in the future.
Yeah. We need to get on the road and head out to where you are in
True.
West LA. So.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah. The traffic will be a little bad right now with quarantine and stuff. We'll keep it light, but it was a pleasure speaking with you again. Definitely we'll contact in the next in the new year, do this again.
Okay, thanks, John.
It's
a pleasure.
Nice
to see you. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. The Immigration Lawyers Podcast is a part of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, a training and marketing program for immigration lawyers. For more information about that, please email us at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Also, you can find more information and updates on the LinkedIn page for the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, as well as a private Facebook group for practicing immigration lawyers. You can email me for information about that as well. And also the Twitter page is a great place for updates. Until next one, have a good one.